My hands wouldn't stop shaking as I stood before the teller's counter at Westfield National Bank. Between my trembling fingers rested a piece of plastic so weathered it seemed to belong in an antique shop rather than my wallet. Years had stolen the clarity from the numbers stamped across its face, while a deep scratch carved through the magnetic strip on its reverse side. Simply holding it filled me with embarrassment. "Please forgive me for bringing this in," I whispered to the banker positioned behind the counter. "It's incredibly old. My father passed it to me years ago. I'm just hoping there might be something left on it. Perhaps a few dollars." The banker, his nameplate identified him as Mr. Banks, offered me a warm smile. Age had grayed his hair and settled glasses low across the bridge of his nose. He carried the appearance of someone whose career at this institution had spanned decades, perhaps predating my birth. "Not a problem whatsoever, ma'am," he responded with genuine kindness. "Let's discover what we can find." He accepted the card from my grasp, examining it with careful attention, rotating it twice before passing it through his card reader. I observed his expression, anticipating news that the card had become too degraded to process or that the associated account had closed years prior. What happened instead was completely unexpected. His face transformed entirely. Blood seemed to drain from his features as if someone had opened a valve. His eyes expanded wide behind those glasses while his mouth dropped open involuntarily. He stared at the computer screen, then shifted his gaze to me, then returned to the screen once more. "Ma'am," he spoke, his voice cracking. He cleared his throat and attempted again. "Ma'am, I need you to. Could you please step behind the counter immediately?" My heart plummeted into my stomach. "What's wrong?" "Why? Please, just accompany me." His request had evolved into something closer to pleading. His hands trembled as he raised the partition separating customers from bank staff. Every person in the bank rotated to stare. A woman cradling an infant gave me a look filled with concern. An elderly gentleman whispered something to the woman beside him. Heat flooded my face with shame. What had I done? Was I facing trouble? Had my father committed some illegal act? Could this card be stolen property? Two security guards materialized seemingly from nowhere, advancing quickly in our direction. Panic began climbing through my chest. "I don't understand," I whispered. "Please, I haven't done anything wrong." But Mr. Banks was already guiding me through a door labeled private, leading me down a corridor. My legs felt unstable. The security guards followed behind us. I wondered whether an arrest was imminent. My mind raced through possibilities. Perhaps my ex-husband Richard had somehow orchestrated this. Perhaps this was another of his calculated cruelties. We entered a compact office where Mr. Banks practically guided me into a chair. He settled at the computer, typed something, and fixed his gaze upon the screen with an expression I couldn't decipher. It wasn't anger. It wasn't suspicion. It was something else entirely, something that resembled fear blended with disbelief. "Ma'am, I need to verify your identity," he stated, his voice tense. "Can you present your driver's license?" My hand shook so violently I could barely manipulate my wallet. I extracted my license and handed it across. He studied it carefully, comparing the name against something displayed on his screen. Then came the questions. My mother's maiden name, my date of birth, my father's complete name, where I was born. I answered each one, my voice barely rising above a whisper. But let me explain how I arrived at that moment. Let me tell you about the 3 days preceding my walk through those bank doors before my entire existence turned upside down. 3 days earlier, 3 days prior, I had been standing on the sidewalk outside what once had been my home. It was a beautiful house featuring white shutters and a garden I'd cultivated with my own hands. I'd invested 12 years in that house. 12 years perfecting it. 12 years believing I was constructing a life alongside someone who loved me. Richard stood in the doorway, arms crossed over his chest. Behind him, I could see her. Leslie, his business partner, his mistress, the woman who'd been smiling at me during dinner parties while secretly demolishing my marriage. She was already touching the curtains I'd selected, already establishing herself in my space. "Clara, you need to leave now," Richard stated. His voice carried the coldness of addressing a stranger. "The lawyers made everything clear. The house is in my name. Cars are in my name. The bank accounts are in my name. You signed the papers. It's finished." "But I don't have anywhere to go," I said, despising how small my voice sounded. "Richard, please. We were married for 12 years. I abandoned my career for you. I supported your business. And I provided you with 12 years of a comfortable life," he interrupted. "We're even. Now go." Leslie appeared beside him, wrapping her arm around his waist. She looked at me with counterfeit sympathy. "It's really for the best, Clara. You'll understand. Sometimes people just grow apart." I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something. But I was so tired, so completely exhausted from months of fighting, months of lawyers and documents and lies. I picked up my single suitcase, one suitcase to contain 12 years of my existence, and walked away. I had $43 in my purse. That was all. Everything else had vanished. I located a motel on the edge of town, the kind of establishment where you pay weekly and try not to examine the carpet stains too closely. The room carried the smell of stale cigarettes and something else I couldn't identify. The air conditioner rattled but barely functioned. At night, I could hear people arguing through the thin walls. On my second night there, sleep evaded me. The mattress was lumpy, and my mind wouldn't stop spinning. I kept contemplating what I was going to do, how I was going to survive. I had no employment, no money, no family to call. My sister Judith and I hadn't spoken in 8 years. Not since she'd called our father a failure and I'd told her to never contact me again. I got up and began searching through my suitcase, looking for anything I might have overlooked, anything valuable I could sell. That's when I discovered the envelope. It was yellowed with age, tucked into the inner pocket of an old jacket. I pulled it out and stared at my father's handwriting on the front. "For my Clara." When the world gets hard, my eyes filled with tears. My father had died 17 years ago when I was 19. He'd been a building superintendent, spending his days repairing broken toilets and replacing light bulbs in a rent-controlled apartment building downtown. He'd never had much money. He wore the same 3 shirts in rotation. He walked everywhere because he said bus fare was wasteful. When he died, there'd barely been enough money for a simple funeral. I opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a bank card and a small note in his familiar handwriting. "Clara, keep this safe. Use it when you really need it. I love you, Dad." I turned the card over in my hands. It looked ancient. I'd completely forgotten about it. He'd given it to me a few weeks before he died, pressing it into my hand with that serious expression he sometimes got. I'd been 18, about to start college, and I'd tucked it away and forgotten about it after he passed. Through college, through meeting Richard, through getting married and moving away, the card had just traveled with me, buried in old belongings. I figured there might be $50 on it, maybe $100 if I was lucky, enough for a few more nights in this terrible motel, enough to buy some time while I figured out what to do next. The bank visit. The next morning, I walked to Westfield National Bank. I'd passed it dozens of times, but never been inside. It was one of those old, impressive buildings with marble columns and heavy brass doors. I almost turned around. I felt so small, so out of place in my worn jeans and wrinkled shirt. But I was hungry. I'd been eating crackers and peanut butter for 2 days because that was all I could afford. So I forced myself through those doors. The bank was busy. People in business suits walked past me like I was invisible. I got in line behind a man wearing an expensive watch and a woman carrying a designer purse. I clutched my father's old card and waited. When it was finally my turn, I approached Mr. Banks and apologized before I even handed him the card. And that's when everything changed. Now I sat in his office watching him stare at his computer screen with that strange expression on his face, the security guard standing by the door. Mr. Banks looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes that I couldn't quite understand. "Mrs. Morton," he said slowly, "I need to ask you, did your father ever discuss his finances with you?" "My father's finances?" I repeated, confused by the question. "Mr. Banks, my father was a building superintendent. He fixed broken heaters and mopped floors. He didn't have finances to discuss." Mr. Banks removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. When he replaced them, he looked at me with something that might have been pity or perhaps respect. I couldn't tell. "Mrs. Morton, I've worked at this bank for 30 years, he said quietly. "I've seen a lot of things, but I've never seen anything quite like this." He rotated his computer screen toward me. "Please look at this carefully." I leaned forward and squinted at the screen. There were numbers, lots of numbers, account information, transaction history. And then I saw the balance at the bottom. My brain couldn't process what I was seeing. The numbers didn't make sense. There were too many of them. I counted the digits twice, then a third time. "That can't be right," I said, my voice barely working. That's a mistake. You made a mistake." "There's no mistake," Mr. Banks said gently. "I've checked 3 times. I had my supervisor check. The account is real and it's yours." "But that says—" I stopped, unable to say the number out loud. "That says 47 million. The room tilted sideways. I gripped the edge of the desk to steady myself. One of the security guards took a step forward, probably worried I was going to faint. Maybe I was. "Mrs. Morton, breathe," Mr. Banks said. He pushed a glass of water toward me. "I know this is a shock." "A shock?" He called $47 million a shock. I started laughing, but it came out wrong, almost like crying. "This has to be a mistake. My father didn't have money. We were poor. We ate pasta 4 nights a week. He patched his work boots with duct tape because he couldn't afford new ones." "Your father was a very careful man," Mr. Banks said. He pulled up another screen and gestured for me to look. 25 years ago, your father owned a small piece of land. Do you know anything about this?" I shook my head. "My father never owned anything. We rented our apartment. According to these records, he inherited a plot of land from his uncle. It was in a part of the city that nobody wanted back then. Industrial area, warehouses, nothing special." Mr. Banks scrolled through documents on his screen. "A developer approached your father wanting to buy it. They were planning something big, but the land was crucial to their project." I listened, still not understanding how this connected to the impossible number on that screen. "Your father sold the land," Mr. Banks continued. "But he was smart about it. Instead of just taking a one-time payment, he negotiated a contract. He would get 5% of all future profits from anything built on that land. The developer agreed because they thought the percentage would amount to almost nothing, maybe a few thousand over the years." "But something changed," I whispered, starting to understand. "They built the Hartley Tower complex," Mr. Banks said. "Do you know it?" Course I knew it. Everyone in the city knew it. It was a massive development downtown, office buildings, luxury apartments, high-end shops. It had transformed an entire neighborhood. "That was built on my father's land?" "On your father's former land," Mr. Banks corrected. "And for 20 years, 5% of the profits from that complex have been deposited into a trust account, an account that was set to transfer to you when you turned 18. My hands were shaking so badly I had to clasp them together. "But I'm 35. Why didn't I know about this?" Mr. Banks pulled up more documents. "The bank sent notification letters when you turned 18, but they went to your father's old address. According to our records, you'd moved by then. You were in college." I nodded slowly. "I got a dorm room, then an apartment with roommates. I never updated any addresses because I didn't have any bank accounts or anything that needed updating. The letters were returned as undeliverable, Mr. Banks explained. The account remained dormant. The money kept accumulating, growing, collecting interest. For 17 years, it's just been sitting here waiting for you. I stood up suddenly, the chair scraping against the floor. This doesn't make sense. If my father had this arrangement, if money was coming in, why did we live the way we did? Why did he work such a hard job? Why did we struggle? I can't answer that, Mr. Banks said softly. But from what I can see in these records, your father never touched the money. Not once. Every deposit went straight into the trust for you. He set it up so that no one could access it except you. Not his creditors, not his family members, and especially not any spouse you might have. The word spouse hit me like cold water. Wait, you're saying my ex-husband couldn't touch this money? That's exactly what I'm saying. Trust was structured very carefully. It's yours alone. Under law, it couldn't be considered a marital asset because it was an inheritance held in an irrevocable trust with you as the sole beneficiary. Your ex-husband would have had no legal claim to it even during the marriage. I sat back down, my mind reeling. Richard. The divorce. The way he'd taken everything and left me with nothing. Had he known about this? I asked quietly. Mrs. Morton, I need to tell you something else, Mr. Banks said, his expression growing serious. This account has security flags on it. 3 months ago, someone made an inquiry about it. They used your name and social security number, but they weren't you. We denied the request and flagged the account. My stomach twisted. 3 months ago, that was right before Richard filed for divorce. I can't speculate about that, Mr. Banks said carefully. But I can tell you that whoever made that inquiry was trying to find information about any accounts in your name. They were fishing, looking for assets. Richard had hired a private investigator. I remembered seeing the charges on our credit card bill before he'd cut me off from everything. He'd claimed it was for business, but he'd been investigating me, looking for anything he could take. He knew, I said quietly. Or at least he suspected there might be something. That's why he rushed the divorce through. That's why he was so cruel about it. He wanted me desperate and broken so I'd never think to look for this. Mr. Banks didn't confirm or deny my theory. He just looked at me with those sad, understanding eyes. What do I do now? I asked. I don't understand any of this. I don't know how to handle this kind of money. First, I'm going to set you up with our private wealth management team, Mr. Banks said. They'll help you understand your options. But Mrs. Morton, you need to get a lawyer, a good one. If your ex-husband gets wind of this, he might try to challenge the divorce settlement. But you said he has no legal claim. He doesn't, but that doesn't mean he won't try. People do strange things when this much money is involved. Mr. Banks handed me a business card. This is the best trust and estate lawyer in the city. Call him today. Tell him I referred you. I took the card with numb fingers. Everything felt surreal, like I was watching this happen to someone else. Can I ask you something? I said quietly. Why did my father do this? Why did he live in poverty when he could have used some of this money? Why did he sacrifice so much? Mr. Banks smiled sadly. I think he wanted you to have a choice, a real choice, the kind of choice that only comes with freedom. And he knew that if anyone found out about this money, including you, everything would change. People would treat you differently. Maybe your ex-husband would have married you for the wrong reasons. Maybe your life would have been different in ways your father couldn't predict. I thought about my father living in that tiny apartment, wearing those same 3 shirts, walking everywhere in his patched boots, all while knowing he had millions sitting in a bank. Also, I could have this moment. This chance. He gave me a gift, I whispered. Yes, Mr. Banks agreed. He gave you freedom. The aftermath. I left the bank through a private exit that Mr. Banks showed me. He said it would be better if I avoided the main lobby where people might be curious about why I'd been escorted to a private office. I walked for blocks without really seeing where I was going. My mind couldn't hold on to a single thought. Every time I tried to process what had just happened, the information slipped away like water through my fingers. $47 million. The words didn't feel real. They felt like something from a movie or a dream. I found myself standing outside a coffee shop. Through the window, I could see people doing normal things, typing on laptops, meeting with friends, complaining about their regular problems. I wanted to be one of them again. I wanted my biggest worry to be whether I could afford a fancy coffee drink. Instead, I pulled out the business card Mr. Banks had given me. The lawyer's name was printed in simple black letters. I called the number before I could lose my courage. The lawyer, Mr. Patterson, agreed to see me that same afternoon. His office was in one of those tall glass buildings downtown that I'd always felt too intimidated to enter. But now I walked through the lobby like I belonged there, because apparently I did. Mr. Patterson was younger than I expected, maybe in his early 40s, with sharp eyes that seemed to see right through me. I told him everything, about Richard, about the divorce, about the bank account, about my father. He listened without interrupting, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Mrs. Morton," he finally said, "I need to tell you something, and you're not going to like it." My stomach dropped. "What?" "I'm going to need to investigate your divorce more carefully, but based on what you've told me, I believe your ex-husband knew about this account, or at least he knew something existed. But how could he know?" "I didn't even know." Mr. Patterson pulled out his phone and made a quick call. He asked someone to pull court records and private investigator reports. Then he looked at me seriously. "You said he hired a private investigator 3 months before filing for divorce. Private investigators don't come cheap. Why would someone spend that kind of money unless they thought there was something valuable to find?" Over the next 2 hours, Mr. Patterson and his team worked like detectives. They pulled records, made phone calls, sent urgent emails. And slowly, a picture began to form. Richard's lawyer had accessed public property records. They'd traced my father's name. They'd found the old land sale. They'd discovered the profit-sharing agreement. They knew money had been going somewhere. What they couldn't find was where. Trust account was protected by privacy laws, but they knew enough to guess. "Your ex-husband filed for divorce knowing you might have access to significant funds," Mr. Patterson explained. "But he also knew the account was protected. He couldn't claim it in the divorce because of how the trust was structured. So he did the next best thing. He took everything he legally could, left you with nothing, and waited." "Waited for what?" "For you to discover the money and voluntarily come to him. If you'd found out about this account while you were desperate and alone, you might have felt grateful to him for the 12 years of marriage. You might have offered to share. People do irrational things when they feel guilty or obligated. Cruelty of it made me feel sick. Richard hadn't just wanted to divorce me. He'd wanted to destroy me first, to break me down so completely that I'd give him what he couldn't legally take. "But he made a mistake," Mr. Patterson said with a small smile. "He underestimated how long it would take you to find the account. And now that you have legal representation, there's nothing he can do. The money is yours. Completely and legally yours." I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt exhausted. Mr. Patterson helped me set up everything I needed. A new bank account at a different bank. A financial advisor. A security team. He even found me a luxury hotel where I could stay under a false name until we figured out what to do next. "Trust me," he said, "when word gets out about this, and it will get out, everyone you've ever known will suddenly want to be your best friend. You need protection. You need privacy. And you need time to think." He was right. I'd been at the hotel for less than 3 days when my phone started ringing. Numbers I didn't recognize. Old acquaintances I hadn't spoken to in years. Even my cousin, who'd never liked me, suddenly wanted to catch up. I ignored them all. But I couldn't ignore the knock on my hotel room door on the fourth morning. "Clara, I know you're in there." Richard's voice came through the door. "We need to talk." My heart pounded. I looked through the peephole and saw him standing there in an expensive suit, his face red with anger. How had he found me? "Clara, this is ridiculous. That money should be family money. We built a life together." Called hotel security. Two large men in suits arrived within minutes and escorted Richard out. But as they led him away, I heard him shouting, "I'll sue you, Clara. That money was earned during our marriage. I have rights." He didn't. Mr. Patterson had been very clear about that. But the threat still frightened me. That evening, I got a call from a number I hadn't seen in 8 years. My sister, Judith. My finger hovered over the decline button, but something made me answer. "Clara." Her voice was tight. "We need to talk about Dad's money." "How did you even hear about it?" "How did I hear?" She laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "It's all over town, Clara. People are talking. And I want to know why you think you deserve all of it when I'm his daughter, too." "Judith, Dad set up the trust for me specifically. He made that choice. Because you were always his favorite," her voice rose. "Poor little Clara who needed protecting. Meanwhile, I was the one who had to be strong, who had to make my own way. And now you get millions while I've been working 2 jobs just to keep my house." "I didn't ask for this," I said quietly. "But you're keeping it, aren't you? You're not going to share with your own sister." "Dad made his choice, Judith. I'm respecting it." She called me names then: selfish, greedy, a bad daughter, and a worse sister. I listened until I couldn't anymore, and then I hung up. She called back 5 more times. I blocked her number. That night I sat alone in my hotel suite. The rooms were beautiful: marble bathrooms, soft robes, a view of the city that probably cost more per night than I used to spend on groceries in a month. But I'd never felt more alone. I thought about calling someone, but who? My old friends had drifted away during my marriage. Richard had made sure of that, always finding reasons why I couldn't go out or why my friends weren't good enough. I had no family except a sister who hated me. No husband. No career. Just money. So much money that everyone I'd ever known suddenly wanted a piece of me. I ordered room service and ate alone, watching the city lights below. Somewhere down there, Richard was probably plotting his next move. Judith was probably calling relatives, turning them against me. And I was here, supposedly living the dream, feeling more trapped than I'd ever felt in my life. My phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. "I know where you're staying. We should meet. You owe me. Richard." I showed the text to Mr. Patterson, who immediately contacted the police. They said it wasn't technically a threat, but they'd document it just in case. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what Mr. Banks had said. My father had given me freedom. But this didn't feel like freedom. This felt like a new kind of prison, one made of money and suspicion and fear. I wondered what my father would tell me if he were here. Would he regret his gift? Would he understand how complicated he'd made everything? Or would he tell me that freedom isn't easy, that it comes with hard choices, and that the real test wasn't receiving the money but deciding what kind of person I'd become because of it? The choice. I spent the next 2 weeks hiding in that hotel room like a prisoner. Mr. Patterson called every day with updates that made my head spin. Richard had hired 3 different lawyers, each one threatening to file lawsuits. Judith had contacted a lawyer too, claiming our father wasn't mentally sound when he set up the trust. Cousins I'd met maybe twice in my life were suddenly sending long emails about family loyalty and sharing blessings. Everyone wanted something from me. No one wanted to just talk to me like a person. On the 15th day, Mr. Patterson came to my hotel room with thick folders of documents. He spread them across the coffee table and sat across from me with a serious expression. Clara, I need you to understand something, he said. You have the legal power to destroy Richard financially. His real estate company is heavily leveraged. He owes money to multiple creditors. If you wanted to, you could buy out those debts and foreclose on everything he owns. You could leave him with nothing, just like he tried to do to you. I stared at the documents, reports on Richard's business, lists of his properties and debts, a detailed plan for how I could systematically dismantle his entire life. Is that what you think I should do? I asked quietly. I think you should consider all your options, Mr. Patterson said carefully. Revenge is a powerful motivator, and after what he did to you, no one would blame you. I picked up one of the reports and flipped through it. Numbers and projections. Cold facts about how to ruin someone's life. I thought about Richard's face when he'd thrown me out. The way Leslie had touched my curtains. Cruelty in his voice when he said we were even. Part of me wanted to do it. The part of me wanted to watch him lose everything and feel exactly what I'd felt standing on that sidewalk with one suitcase. But then I thought about my father, George Hartley, who'd had millions but fixed toilets for elderly neighbors who couldn't afford a plumber, who'd worn patched boots and walked in the rain to save bus fare, who'd chosen kindness over comfort every single day. No, I said, pushing the documents away. I'm not going to destroy him. Mr. Patterson nodded slowly. Then what do you want to do? I thought about that question for a long time. What did I want? For weeks, I'd been reacting to everyone else, running from Richard, hiding from Judith, avoiding reporters and old acquaintances. I'd been so focused on protecting myself that I hadn't thought about what I actually wanted to build. I want to help people, I said finally. People like me. Women who get thrown away and left with nothing. Over the next few days, I worked with Mr. Patterson and a team of advisors to create a foundation. We called it Second Chances. Its purpose was simple: to help divorced women who'd been left financially devastated by their ex-husbands. We'd provide temporary housing, job training, legal assistance, and small grants to help them restart their lives. The work gave me purpose. For the first time since finding out about the money, I felt like myself again. Not a victim. Not a wealthy woman everyone wanted to use. Just Clara trying to do something good. But I couldn't let Richard's behavior go completely unaddressed. Not for revenge, but because he was still hurting people. I asked Mr. Patterson to investigate Richard's business practices. What we found shocked even the lawyers. Richard and Leslie had been cutting corners for years. They'd been hiding major defects in properties they sold, inflating property values to get bigger loans, paying off inspectors to overlook code violations. They'd sold at least a dozen homes to families who had no idea they were buying properties with serious structural problems. One family had bought a house with a cracked foundation that Richard's company had simply covered with fresh concrete. Another had purchased a condo where the balcony was barely attached to the building. These weren't small mistakes. These were dangerous, deliberate frauds that could get people killed. "This isn't about you anymore," Mr. Patterson said when he showed me the evidence. "This is about protecting innocent people from criminals." He was right. This wasn't revenge. This was doing what was right. We compiled everything and submitted it to the state's real estate commission and the district attorney's office. We did it anonymously. I didn't want credit. I just wanted it stopped. Within a week, investigators raided Richard's office. I watched the news coverage from my hotel room, seeing Richard and Leslie being let out in handcuffs for questioning. They weren't arrested that day, but the investigation had begun. Richard's business license was immediately suspended. My phone rang an hour later. It was Richard. Against my better judgment, I answered. "You did this," he hissed. "You destroyed my business because you're bitter and jealous." "I submitted evidence of fraud," I said calmly. "What happens next is up to the authorities." Those families signed contracts. They accepted the properties as is. This is a witch hunt. Those families were lied to, Richard. You knew about the defects and hid them. That's not business. That's fraud. I'll fight this, he said. And when I do, I'm coming after you. I'll sue you for everything you have. That money should have been mine. The money was never yours, I said. And it never will be. Goodbye, Richard. I hung up and blocked his number. My hands were shaking, but I felt something I hadn't felt in months. I felt strong. A few days later, Richard called again from a different number. This time his voice was different, smaller, desperate. Clara, please. I need your help. What? The investigation is killing me. My investors are pulling out. The banks are calling in my loans. I'm going to lose everything. He paused. I know I was wrong. I know I hurt you. But please, you have the resources to help me. We were married for 12 years. That has to count for something. I thought about those 12 years, the good times before everything went bad. The man I'd fallen in love with before greed and ambition changed him. Part of me felt sorry for him. But a bigger part of me remembered standing on that sidewalk with one suitcase while Leslie redecorated my home. Richard, I'm going to meet you for coffee, I said. One time. Tomorrow. Then we're done. We met at a small cafe, far from anywhere we used to go. Richard looked terrible. His expensive suit was wrinkled. His hair needed cutting. He had dark circles under his eyes. Thank you for coming, he said as I sat down. I know I don't deserve it. You don't, I agreed. Clara, I made mistakes, huge mistakes. But I'm asking you, please help me get through this. I'll pay you back. I'll do whatever you want. Just help me. I looked at the man sitting across from me and tried to remember why I'd loved him. But that person was gone. Maybe he'd never really existed. No, I said simply. What? No, Richard. I'm not going to save you from the consequences of your own choices. You didn't just hurt me. You hurt innocent families. You built your business on lies and fraud. And when you had the chance to do the right thing, you threw me out with nothing. I made a mistake. You made many mistakes. And I'm not interested in fixing them for you. I stood up. I hope you find a way through this, Richard. I really do. But that way doesn't include me. Clara, wait. Goodbye, Richard. I mean it this time. Really goodbye. I walked out of that cafe and felt something lift from my shoulders. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't satisfaction. It was simply closure, the end of a chapter I'd been dragging behind me for too long. That night, I made a decision. I was done hiding. 6 months later. 6 months changed everything. I moved out of the hotel and into a modest apartment in a neighborhood I'd always loved. Not a penthouse. Not a mansion. Just a comfortable 2-bedroom with big windows and a small balcony where I could drink my morning coffee. The rent was probably less than what some people paid for their car payments, but it felt like home in a way that mansion with Richard never had. The foundation became my purpose. Second chances had helped 37 women in just 6 months. We'd provided emergency housing, connected them with jobs, paid for their children's school supplies, and covered legal fees for custody battles. Each woman had a different story, but they all had the same look in their eyes when they first walked through our doors, that lost, frightened look I recognized because I'd worn it myself. Watching them rebuild their lives gave me something I hadn't expected. Gave me peace. I'd also bought 3 apartment buildings in working-class neighborhoods, not as investments to flip or profit from, but to provide affordable housing. I kept the rents low, fixed things promptly, and created a place where families could actually save money instead of drowning in housing costs. Over 200 people now had stable, decent homes because of those buildings. The lawyers sent me monthly reports about Richard. His company had completely collapsed under investigation. Charges were serious enough that he was facing potential prison time. Leslie had left him the moment the money disappeared, moving to another state with a new boyfriend. Richard had lost his house, his cars, everything. Last I heard, he was living in a small apartment and working at his brother's car dealership. I felt nothing when I read those reports. Not satisfaction. Not pity. Just nothing. He'd become a stranger to me, someone from a life I barely remembered. Judith tried to contact me a few more times, always with lawyers or demands. When those didn't work, she tried guilt, sending long emails about family and how disappointed our father would be. I never responded. Mr. Patterson handled all of it. Eventually, she gave up. On a cool October afternoon, I drove to Oakwood Cemetery for the first time since I discovered the truth about the money. I brought yellow roses, my father's favorite, and walked across the grass to his simple headstone. George Hartley, beloved father. The dates of his birth and death. Nothing fancy. That's how he would have wanted it. I sat down on the grass beside his grave, not caring that it was slightly damp from morning dew. For a long moment, I just sat there looking at his name carved in stone. "Hi, Dad," I said quietly. "I'm sorry it took me so long to come back." A breeze rustled through the trees. Somewhere nearby, a bird was singing. "I found the money," I continued. "I'm sure you know that already, wherever you are. And I need to tell you something. For a while, I was angry at you. I couldn't understand why you lived the way you did when you could have been comfortable. Why you let us struggle. Why you kept it all secret." I picked at the grass, feeling tears start to build behind my eyes. "But I think I understand now. You were teaching me something. You were showing me that money doesn't define who you are. That kindness and integrity matter more than comfort. That the richest person isn't the one with the most money, but the one who knows how to use what they have to help others." Tears spilled over then, running down my cheeks. "You could have told me. You could have made your own life easier. But you chose to protect me instead. You chose to make sure I learned the right lessons first. And I want you to know that I'm trying, Dad. I'm trying to honor what you taught me." I told him about the foundation, about the apartment buildings, about the women I'd helped and the families who now had safe homes. I told him about Richard and how I'd chosen not to destroy him, even though I could have. I told him about walking away from revenge and choosing something better. "I created a scholarship too," I said, wiping my eyes. "In your name, the George Hartley Scholarship. It's for students from working-class families who want to go to college. Kids whose parents fix heaters and mop floors and work hard but don't have extra money. We gave out the first one last week." I pulled out my phone and showed his headstone a picture, even though I knew he couldn't see it. A young girl with bright eyes and a huge smile, holding her scholarship certificate. Her father works as a janitor at a hospital, working night shifts so his daughter can have a better life. I whispered, "She reminded me of us. Her dad reminds me of you. And when I gave her that scholarship, Dad, I saw you in her eyes. That same hope. That same determination. That same belief that hard work and kindness matter." I stayed there for a long time talking to him about everything and nothing. About how I was learning to manage the money responsibly. About the friends I'd reconnected with, the real ones who liked me before they knew about the fortune. About how I was thinking of going back to school, maybe studying social work so I could help people even better. "I'm not going to waste what you gave me," I promised. "Not the money and not the lessons. You gave me freedom, Dad. Real freedom. The freedom to choose who I want to be. And I choose to be like you." As I stood to leave, I placed the roses against his headstone. "Thank you," I said simply. "For everything. For the sacrifice. For the love. For believing I'd figure it out eventually. I love you, Dad. I always will." I walked back to my car, feeling lighter than I had in months, maybe years. Moving forward. The next week, I attended the scholarship award ceremony at the community college. There were parents there, proud and teary-eyed, watching their children receive opportunities they'd never had themselves. I shook hands with each student, looking them in the eyes and telling them to work hard and never forget where they came from. The young woman whose father was a janitor came up to me afterward. "Thank you, Miss Morton," she said, her voice shaking with emotion. "This scholarship means everything to my family. My dad works so hard, and now he doesn't have to worry about how to pay for my school. I promise I'll make you proud." I took her hands in mine. "You don't need to make me proud. Make yourself proud. And someday when you're able, help someone else the way someone helped you. That's all I ask." She nodded, tears in her eyes, and hugged me. Her father approached then, a man with calloused hands and kind eyes, wearing his best suit that had probably been bought from a thrift store. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick. "You don't know what this means. My daughter, she's so smart. She deserves this chance. My father worked hard too," I told him. "Just like you. He taught me that the best thing you can give someone isn't money. It's opportunity. Your daughter has opportunity now. The rest is up to her." That evening, I stood at the window of my apartment, looking out at the city lights. I thought about the woman I'd been 6 months ago, standing in that bank with a worn card and $43 to her name. That woman had been broken, lost, afraid. She was gone now. In her place was someone stronger. Someone who understood that wealth wasn't measured in dollars, but in the lives you touched and the good you created. Someone who knew that the best revenge wasn't destroying your enemies, but becoming someone they could never touch. I thought about Richard, probably bitter and angry somewhere, blaming everyone but himself for his failures. I thought about Judith, still resentful and jealous. They were trapped in their own prisons of anger and greed. But I was free. Truly free. Not because I had money, but because I'd learned what really mattered. My phone buzzed with a text from one of the women at the foundation. She'd just gotten her first paycheck from her new job. She was crying happy tears. She wanted me to know that she was going to make it, that her kids were going to be okay. I smiled and typed back, "Congratulations." Then I looked back out at the city, at all those lights representing all those lives, all those stories, all those people just trying to make it through another day. Somewhere out there were more women who needed help. More families struggling to keep roofs over their heads. More young people who deserved a chance. And now I had the resources to help them. Not because I was special or deserved it more than anyone else, but because my father had made a choice 17 years ago. He'd chosen to give me not just money, but a responsibility. Purpose. I wasn't going to let him down. I picked up my laptop and opened my notes. I'd been working on plans to expand the foundation to 3 more cities, to buy 2 more apartment buildings, to increase the scholarship fund. There was so much work to do. So many people to help. For the first time in my entire adult life, I knew exactly who I was and what I was meant to do. I was Clara Morton, daughter of George Hartley. And I was finally free.